Common Sense. Use it or lose it. Part 4.
Before we begin this presentation, we remind you we are definitely on a search to find and align with the divine and sacred few. Therefore, this message is intended to connect with the sacred ancestral soulful essence genetically encoded within you.
Sacred priesthood teachings taught to the other Jesus.
After all that is said and done, it is our natural, innate duty, obligation, and responsibility to forward this resurrection movement of the divine children of the sun and the sacred garden culture from which we come. What a mission! And how can such a thing be accomplished in the midst of cold-blooded, deep-seated conflict, confusion, and chaos? This is not a new mission or a new question. And in fact, the guiding principles have been encoded in holistic living teachings as preserved by the sacred ancestral priesthoods of old. Master teachings that encompass all living matter, speaking of the universal order that stabilizes the essence of life in all living systems, from the cell to the body temple of man, he and she, to the larger social body of family community, to the even larger planetary body of man, he and she, as a species of living beings. These principles encompass the structure and functions of living systems, from the DNA molecule to the cosmic bodies of the galaxy. Thus, the Quatermani Royal Priesthood continues to forward multidimensional encodes for the seen and unseen presence of all that we are. Be clear right here. We have not come to theorize or fantasize or intellectualize. No, we did not come to mesmerize, rationalize, or individualize. We came to actualize a holistic living way of life. That's right. We're talking about divine social, economic, family, community order. That magnificent order that is encoded in the DNA, activating genetic memory, imprinting the sacred ancestral consciousness that was preserved by priests and priestesses who forwarded the sacred order of the Ankh. Yes, there has been contamination, corruption, genetic mutation, and degeneration, resulting in a lower and lesser consciousness that is individuated, disconnected, isolated, outside of divine order. Many can sense the lurking energies of conflict, confusion, and chaos becoming more visible to the naked eye. As a result, many are seeking refuge. Refugees from the toxic parallel, identified as Babylon, Western culture, or any other social, economic, political, or religious system that oppresses one's mental, physical, and spiritual growth and development as an earth solar conscious being. However, what many neglect to realize is that the greatest oppressive and abusive nature of energy that man, he and she has ever encountered is the ego-driven, individualistic, deified self that seeks to dominate and control others by exalting its will above all else. The deified self that lurks within. As we began this lecture series, Common Sense, Use It or Lose It, we make note of the fact that many have contacted us, feeling the undercurrents of what has been called the Back to Nature movement, back to the land, exiting Babylon, move into the tropics, communal living, all of that. This has been going on for a few years now, during this present generation. For those of us elders who have experienced the ideology of the 1960s, back to nature movements, the commune, free love, the back to Africa movements, and diaspora repatriation, what we see is that the lessons of old were not taught and therefore not learned, or they were ignored because the young bloods feel like the old heads are out of touch. So each time the youth attempt to reinvent the wheel and end up falling victim to the same old overbloated individualistic nature of self-deification, which is the primary reason why there are very few master teachers to forward the master teachings of divine social economic family community order. And the vicious cycle continues. With 17 down and 1 to go, doing this for new cycle wind down, including 9 years to secure the mental stability, 9 years to secure the physical land base, and this third phase of 9 to secure the spirit-conscious resurrection of a divine and sacred few. We have been receiving many communications. A recent email from a young brother whose name we will not mention expresses a situation encountered by so many.
I was recovering from all the drama and controversy and countless people contacting me in the Back to Nature movement for this, that, and the third. And on top of that, I was dealing with a lot of personal reflection. In all honesty, I was left somewhat bitter, confused, and lonely, and still am to a degree from my experience. Long story short, I have been trying in various ways to put together a group and live harmoniously off the land, but all three of my attempts have failed to make it to the end. I'm sure many have been reaching out to you, especially since your ... video. So I am sure you're aware that you have to use great discernment, but if you'd like to give me the opportunity of at least meeting you all, that would be great.
This communication caused the priesthood to check out social media to investigate the situation, and we found out a lot.
We saw that people were searching for the place. Where is it? Brazil, Guyana, Nicaragua, Peru, Ghana. Nah, they say it's in Belize. Yeah, they say there is a long-standing successful community of raw vegans. However, their spiritual leader, High Priest Kwatamani, is so strict. Lots of rules, and even their protocols for visits are full of restrictions. Worse than that, they're a closed community, elitist.
Now, I'm going to take a little time to address a few things collectively for the sake of he and she who are feeling the undercurrent of not being fully prepared or divinely guided during these times of earth-shifting change. Yes, that's right. The children of the sun are in a serious crisis situation. We note that most individuals are not really focused on the duties, obligations, and responsibilities of family or community or order. No, most individuals are seeking to satisfy personal ambitions and strategies through others. Their true aim is to figure out how others can be used to assist them in reaching their goals of self-deifying glory. And as long as there is common ground, then one may calculate how much to compromise or cooperate so as to get one's way. Therefore, any group of individuals will only be able to relate in terms of various degrees of self-deification. It does not matter what location you choose, because wherever you go, you will only spread the same contamination of the same mindset that was with you when you packed your bag and started your travel in the first place. That is why we're talking about a holistic living movement that requires emerging into an entirely different nature of energy. That's right. This so-called Back to Nature movement has to be about much more than just moving from point A to point B in physical terms. The first point to remember is that if it is not about the sacred order of the Ankh, if it is not about divine consumption, fruits of the tree of life, divine union, he and she, and the forward multiplication of divinity into every offspring and vibration of the generation next, through divine social economic family community order, then we of the Kwatamani Royal Priesthood are not about that. And as a matter of fact, anyone who truly and sincerely seeks holistic living resurrection out of the nature of the toxic parallel will feel exactly the same as we do. It has been historically documented by the sacred ancestral Kemetic priesthood of old that the nature of energy that aligns with the divine laws of universal order directly aligns with divine social economic family community order and has been long-standing within the sacred ancestral consciousness of man, he and she, as encoded in the DNA. We refer to Plato's accounts of the Egyptian priesthood, ancient Kemetic records.
Many great delusions have taken place during the 9,000 years, for that is the number of years which have elapsed since the time of which I am speaking. For many generations, as long as the divine nature lasted in them, they were obedient to the laws, for they possessed true and in every way great spirits, practicing gentleness and wisdom in the various chances of life and in their intercourse with one another. But when this divine portion began to fade away in them and became diluted too often and with too much of the mortal admixture, and the human nature got the upper hand, then they, being unable to bear their fortune, became unseemly. To him who had an eye to see, they began to appear base and had lost the fairest of their precious gifts.
In other words, when the children of the sun begin to deviate from their natural innate state of divine social, economic, family, community order, that lower and lesser nature of Set, Sutik, Satan, the deified self, got the best of them and took them down. The nature of energy that fuels one's existence as an individualistic, ego-driven self was not able, is not able, and will never be able to provide the fortitude, the tenacity, and commitment necessary for one to emerge into divine social, economic, family, community order. Few truly comprehend how the deified self actually stands opposed to the divine union of masculine and feminine energy. The divine union of masculine and feminine energy activates the DNA to regenerate spirit-conscious pathways of communications in the brain. We note that the double helix of the DNA, which has been represented as intertwining serpents in ancient cultures, is a physical imprint of the divine union of masculine and feminine energy, encoding the sacred order of the Ankh as the sacred ancestral way of life that forwarded our coming as man, he, and she, divine children of the sun. Yes, we emerge within a holistic living consciousness, a nature, a spirit, a reality that encompasses the wholeness of our existence. He and she, moving and grooving within the ebb and the flow of an upward spiral, living energy that has been called Kundalini and many other names. However, the divisive nature of the deified self automatically blocks the holistic living encodes that fuel the detoxing, purging, and healing process necessary to activate the elimination of self-deification. As a result, envy, defensiveness, and hostile attacks keeps the deified self standing outside of divine social, economic, family, community order. Why? Because power concedes nothing without a struggle against divine order, a struggle against sacred ancestral eldership guidance. We're talking about the individualistic struggle to emerge into a divine state of being, while one remains stuck in the limited and divisive nature of self-deification. Let's continue to review Plato's accounts of the ancestral priesthood as recorded.
Plato lived 400 years before the birth of Christ. His ancestor Solon was the great lawgiver of Athens 600 years before the Christian era. Solon visited Egypt. There can be no question that Solon visited Egypt. The causes of his departure from Athens for a period of 10 years are fully explained by Plutarch. He dwelt, he tells us, on the Canopian shore by the Nile's deep mouth. There he conversed upon points of philosophy and history with the most learned of the Egyptian priests. Thereupon one of the priests, who was of very great age, said, "Oh, Solon, Solon, you Hellenes are but children, and there is never an old man who is an Hellene." Solon, hearing this, said, "What do you mean?" "I mean to say," he replied, "that in mind you are all young. There is no old opinion handed down among you by ancient tradition, nor any science which is hoary with age, and I will tell you the reason of this. There have been, and there will be again, many destructions of mankind, arising out of many causes. The fact is that wherever whatever the extremity of winter frost or of summer sun does not prevent. The human race is always increasing at times, or at other times diminishing in numbers. And whatever happened either in your country or in ours, or in any other region of which we are informed, if any action which is noble or great or in any other way remarkable has taken place, all that has been written down of old and is preserved in our temples. As for those genealogies of yours which you have recounted to us, Salome, they are no better than the tales of children, for in the first place you remember one deluge only, whereas there were many of them. As touching the citizens of 9,000 years ago, I will briefly inform you of their laws and of the noblest of their actions, and the exact particulars of the whole we will hereafter go through at our leisure in the sacred registers. We note that the Hellenes were the ancient Greeks.
The seeds of wisdom from the sacred ancestral Kemetic priesthood of old forwarded a holistic living nature of energy that somehow survived in spite of the corruptions, contaminations inflicted by invading nomadic sheep-herding tribes and clans who co-opted, plagiarized, and attempted to claim ownership of a nature that is completely opposite from the blood-spilling, flesh-consuming nature they practice as a way of life. Yes, supreme truth was buried, but the seeds still carry the encodes of holistic living resurrection. The senior priestess will share a few familiar words from Genesis 1, the first beginning, that speaks of the holistic living nature of energy.
In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth brought forth grass and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. And God blessed them. And God said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree, in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat.
Natural and innate in divine order, with earth, wind, rain, and sun, the holistic living creation of man, he and she, at peace, in harmony, in sync, and in alignment with the supreme state of being. The sacred order of the Ankh, divine consumption, fruit of the tree, divine union, he and she, and the forward multiplication of divinity into every offspring and vibration of he and she through divine social, economic, family, community, order. The consequences of deviating from divine order are what we call universal justice, the divine laws of Ma'at that functions to restore and maintain balance, harmony, and divine order as the ultimate judgment of what is in alignment with the essence of life and supreme love, and what remains outside in the toxic parallel of oblivious nothingness. Therefore, despite the loud talk and self-deifying claims, there is no way to escape the consequences of consuming of a lower and lesser nature of energy, and any deviation from divine order will manifest as disorder in one's mental, physical, and or spiritual state of being. Common sense will allow one to reason with the fact that man, he and she, are natural and innate plant consumers, consumers of the tree of life, as identified in Genesis 1. When one deviates from one natural and innate consumption patterns, then the signs and symptoms of conflict, confusion, and the chaotic nature of sickness, disease, and disorder will be the undeniable resorts. Common sense reasoning here. This is the very same holistic living message that was echoed by another Jesus, aka the other Jesus. We're speaking about a nature of energy that differs from Apostle Paul's Jesus.
And then many sick and maimed came to Jesus asking him, If you know all things, tell us, why do we suffer with these grievous plagues? Why are we not whole like other men? Master, heal us, that we may be made strong and need abide no longer in our misery. We know that you have it in your power to heal all manner of disease. Free us from Satan and from all his great afflictions. Master, have compassion on us. And Jesus spoke.
For I will tell you truly, from one mother proceeds all that lives upon the earth. For I will tell you truly, he who kills, kills himself. And whoso eats the flesh of slain beasts, eats of the body of death. Kill not, neither eat the flesh of your innocent prey, lest you become the slaves of Satan. For that is the path of sufferings, and it leads unto death. But I do say to you, kill neither man nor beast, nor yet the food which goes into your mouth. For everything which kills your foods kills your bodies also, and everything which kills your bodies kills your souls also. And your bodies become what your foods are, even as your spirits likewise become what your thoughts are. Therefore, eat not anything which fire or frost or water has destroyed, for burned, frozen, and rotted foods will burn, freeze, and rot your body also. With that fire of death you cook your foods in your homes and in your fields. I tell you truly, it is the same fire which destroys your foods and your bodies, even as the fire of malice which ravages your thoughts, ravages your spirits. For your body is that which you eat, and your spirit is that which you think.
From the Essene Gospel of Peace, Book 1, taken from the Asarian Sacred Ancestral Temple of Christ, Whole Life Healing Through Plant-Based Consumption by High Priest Kwatamani.
Ancient Kemetic wisdom states that you are what you eat. One is the sum total of the energy that one consumes, mentally, physically, and spiritually. What you put in is what will come out, and what you put out is what will come back to you when you least expect it.
It's official. Ham, sausage, and other processed meats can lead to colon, stomach, and other cancers, and red meat is probably cancer-causing too. While doctors have long warned against eating too much meat, the World Health Organization's Cancer Agency gave the most definitive response yet about its relation to cancer and put processed meats in the same danger category as cigarettes or asbestos. Taken from the Christ Text by High Priest Kwatamani, page 24.
As we have said, there are two distinctively different natures of energy, and each nature is fueled by a food supply in its own image. Yes, food is the solid representation of the energy that one consumes. Junk food, fast food, soul food. Let us examine the nature of the fuel that one intakes to maintain life. Food supplied by the tree of life and the seed-bearing fruit is the expression of a life-sustaining nature. Raw and living fruits, vegetables, seeds, and nuts are the product of a divine union, earth, wind, rain, and sun in harmony, and as such, forward the holistic living nature that fuels a holistic living way of life. The garden culture environments and populations that till the soil did cultivate a nature of energy that expresses the potent capacity of the seed. On the other hand, food supplied by hunting and herding and dead animals and cooked food substances are the expressions of a life-depleting nature. The flesh of blood and bones and skin is the product of slaughter, and as such, forward the blood-spilling nature of blood sacrifice and burnt offerings, and as such, forward the lower and lesser nature that fuels a deadening, devitalized, and depleted way of life. The Kemetic Egyptian priesthoods of old told of these two natures of energy within the earliest recording stories of two brothers and two sisters, among others within the royal family of man, he and she. Elder brother Sar embodied sacred ancestral masculinity within the nature of energy that forwarded the original man, he and she. Asar emerged as the green god of the black land, the lands of Ethiopia, the lands of higher peace, a god of fertility and vegetation, who gained great honor because he spread the master teachings of a holistic living way of life. Set, the younger brother, was born of the same royal family, but his nature was marked by a trait of violent temperament. As it was noted, Set ripped and tore his way out of his mother's womb, trying to come too soon, forced in his will beyond the rhythms and cycles of femininity, Mother Nature, Mother Earth, and otherwise. Thus, self-birth marked the violent, blood-spilling nature of the self asserting its will to dominate, control, and rule. Set is a nature of energy. Set is a state of being. Set is a toxic parallel of consciousness, and Set embodies historical figures and continue to embody in mass population as we speak. As a matter of fact, there is no one who has not encountered Set and who do not face the mental task of detoxing, purging, and healing from the adverse effects thereof. We remind you that Set is just another name for the deified self. Yes, Set's nature took a turn for the worse. The Sethian curse, satanic, perverse. He crossed the line and got the mind to enact the physical destruction of Asar, although Set could not destroy the essence of the Asarian soul. In other words, Set became a threat to the wholesome health and well-being of the divine socio-economic family community body. Master teachings have been forwarded to secure our wholesome mental, physical, and spiritual health and well-being. The vital organs have all been assigned a position and are instructed as to how to carry out the essential works of living. The cells of the heart are encoded with master teachings, and the heart is encoded to beat in rhythm and in sync with the body's inner movement so as to pump enough life energy to maintain a living presence. Master teachings are taught and learned in each and every organ, in each and every cellular formation that gathers to form the divine socio-economic family community body, encoded by holistic living consciousness. We're talking about divine order, the essence of life, encoded in every living cell, every living organ, every living system, functioning in oneness, working together to maintain the essence of life, from head to toe, spirit, body, and brain. This is the master teachings that is taught through every living thing. No fantasy, no delusion, no illusion, no dream, non-interrupted, unless corrupted. Deviant cellular behavior, as well as deviant thoughts and reasoning, eventually produce signs and symptoms of deviant disorder. Likewise, deviant behaviors in he and she causes a spiritual decline, leading into a lower and lesser nature of energy that degrades relationships, degrades the social order, and breeds a culture of moral decay. Oh yes, there is the self, the guardian of the body temple, installed within the memory bank of the brain to protect the physical boundaries of the soul. All was good until that bad mamma jamma turned cold and wanted to take control, seeking to imprison and enslave the soul. The ego-driven self, deified with arrogance and pride, had a great fall, leaving a bloody mess, trying to possess and control it all. The noted Kemetic historian and high priest Manetho, who preserved the accounts of those times, states,
Unexpectedly from the regions of the east, invaders of obscure race marched in confidence of victory against our land. By main force, they easily overpowered the rulers of the land. They then burned our cities ruthlessly, razed to the ground the temples of the gods, and treated all the natives with a cruel hostility, massacring some and leading into slavery the wives and children of others. From Manetho's Egyptiaca, around 1674 to 1548 BCE, the Hyksos invasion of ancient Kemet / Egypt. The Hyksos were a collection of all the nomadic hordes of Syria and Arabia, who made common cause against Kemet, a foe known to be wealthy, and who all equally desired settlements in a land reputed the most productive in the East. The Hyksos killed all male Egyptians they found. The rest fled. The new rulers then instituted slavery, which was previously unknown in Egypt. These people were whom the connection between Apophis and Set were made. The foreigners had noticed the similarities between their god Baal and Set. They thus worshipped Set in Egypt. Apophis, the last remaining Hyksos king, took him Sutek, Seth, for Lord, and served not any god that was in the whole land save only Sutek, Set. Taken from the prophetic 12,594-year Banu cycle, encoding the consciousness of higher peace through the divine union of masculine and feminine energy, Book 3, Spiritual Analysis of Western Culture and the Reawakening of Naga Consciousness by High Priest Kwatamani.
The invading nature of energy was characterized by Hebrews, outsiders, those who stood opposed to divine socio-economic family community order. Outsiders who desecrated and contaminated the sacred garden culture way of life, and so it remains today. Oh yes, when individuals discover that divine socio-economic family community order requires an entire different nature of energy, their deified self jumps up to attack with all of the ugliness, bitterness, and emotional venom that beastly nature can amass. While most acknowledge early in the process that he or she is simply not willing to meet the requirements of a holistic living way of life, every once in a while there is that one, yes, there is that one who claims that he or she was scammed because he or she believed that his or her deified self was somehow going to prevail within a holistic living nature of energy that does not honor the plots and ploys of self-deification. Not possible. No worshippers of self-deification up in here. Translated, no worshippers of the satanic nature as defined by the self-proclaimed Satanists themselves. And yes, just as there's a sacred ancestral priesthood of the holistic living way of life, there is a priesthood of self-deification, a priesthood of the satanic nature, overt and covert, any way the deified self wants to roll. Let us now hear from the modern-day translations of those who openly honor Set, Sutik, Satan, the deified self.
While the Temple of Set as an organization was formally incorporated and recognized by both state and federal governments in 1975 CE, its magical and philosophical roots are prehistoric, originating in mankind's first apprehension that there is, quote, something different about the human race, a sense of self-consciousness that places humanity apart from all other known forms of life. Ancient religions, of which those of Egypt are generally acknowledged the eldest, either exalted or feared this self-consciousness. Those which exalted it took the position that the human psyche is capable of opposition to and domination of the forces of nature. Individual existence is the first premise of the Temple of Set. The worship of Set is thus the worship of individualism. The mission of the Temple of Set is to recreate a tradition of self-deification. The Satanist word is an ancient Egyptian verb, kepra, written into the hieroglyph of the scarab beetle. It means, I have come into being. Kepra is a mandate for self-improvement. The archetype of isolated intelligence is the Egyptian god Set, whose priesthood can be traced to pre-dynastic times. Set's name originally meant cutter or isolator. He is a personification of the process of becoming more and more your own self. Set's first cult site being in the eastern delta, Set's worship quickly spread to the border areas, the south, and the Libyan settlement of Umbos. No matter how, quote, evil Set was, the essential function of Set, of going out and expanding the borders of existence and then returning that chaotic energy to the center, always continued. Satanism, certainly it reached its peak in the 19th and 20th dynasties when a family of Setian priests from Tanis became the pharaonic line. During this time of expanding borders, Set was extraordinarily popular, as can be seen by the pharaoh's names, such as Seti, which means Set's man, and Setnach, which is Set is mighty. Delighted in Set, both in his militaristic role and as god of foreign places, Ramses II, for example, called himself the son of Set. The third blooming of Satanism came with the coming of the Greeks to Egypt. It is from this period that the Hellenic Greek notions of independence and self-worth began to revive aspects of the new kingdom Set cult. The fourth blooming of Satanism began in the 19th century, that's in the 1800s, with certain archaeological discoveries. Baphomet has become the ultimate scapegoat, a dark, foreboding figure, one synonymous with that Judeo-Christian miscreant called Satan. But in truth, Baphomet can represent the accomplishment of reaching the, quote, higher self. Because of this, it has been adopted by those of the left-hand path as a symbol of self-deification or becoming one's own God.
We know that many an ego is being triggered right about now, on the defense right about now, offended and righteously indignant at the thought of being accused of being satanic in nature. However, a sacred few will be able to reason that Satan is the common persona of the deified self, shape-shifting into the many faces of an ego-driven, individualistic nature. Remember, the other Jesus was indeed crucified for speaking the truth as he saw it, especially in regards to identifying the satanic nature of so many who sat in self-righteous judgment of others. Let us hear from one Jesus who spoke to those who stood opposed to divine order, those who stood opposed to divine social, economic, family, community order.
You are of your father, the devil, and you want to do the desires of your father. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth because there is no truth in him. Whenever he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own nature, for he is a liar and the father of lies. John 8:44.
And now the biological clock of man, he and she, the planetary clock of Mother Earth, and the cosmic clock of universal order are just about to strike the 12th hour in the coming of this new cycle. So now you know there is a holistic living nature of energy that exists as a living reality within divine social, economic, family, community order that draws the line as the circle of life. And all that stands outside of that nature stands opposed to divine order, and thus, by its nature, is identified as Set, Sutik, Satan, the deified self. You have been given a vital tool to assist in spiritual discernment, common sense. Use it or lose it.